guys, this is the Decoder,
This is the Second Chance Gamer.
and for today's review, we're doing the second and final part of our combo review. For
Yeah.
now, we might do one in the future, but we're not sure yet. This is our last one for a bit.
And the game for today is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, Mutant Nightmare. Now, the game was released in 2005, a year after Battle Nexus, and the thing about it is, it feels exactly the same as the other one.
One part that makes it feel the same is the graphics. The graphics are exactly the same, but it's a year later than Battle Nexus. I mean, you should feel like better graphics, but it's exactly the same and there's no improvement at all.
The one thing that makes it feel exactly the same is that in Battle Nexus, when you stopped Michelangelo, he would swing his nunchucks around. But in this one, he does the exact same thing in Battle Nexus. They didn't change anything about it.
It kind of feels like they just took the game, edited, made new levels and put a new plot in it, and that's Battle Nexus. I mean, Mutant Nightmare. And just to make one thing clear, we are reviewing the GameCube version, and all the versions of the game were made by Konami, the same people who made all versions of Battle Nexus.
Speaking of the versions, there were many versions of Mutant Nightmare and Battle Nexus, just to throw that in. There's a DS version of Mutant Nightmare, which just came out at the time. There's an Xbox version, and there's a PS2 version.
Before I continue this review, I wanted to state a couple historical facts about this game. It's the first game with an E10 rating. Not only that, but it's also Konami's last game with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles before the series went off to Ubisoft.
Now, the one thing we have to really get into is the plot of the game. Now, the plot is kind of hard to understand, but Battle Nexus was based off of Season 2 of the show, and Mutant Nightmare was based off of
Season 3. And there was another game. We're not reviewing it. We don't have it. It's based off of Season 1, and the graphics are similar in all the games, but in Battle Nexus, we did notice a slight improvement in the graphics because we played a demo of it, but in the third one, there's no improvement at all.
Now, the plot is kind of hard to understand, as I said before, but the plot is basically you're trying to save the Earth. That's it. It's kind of hard to understand, as I said before too, but the plot's just underwhelming. It just really doesn't suit the game that well. And when we played the game for the first time, the first mission is you have to save Grandma, and that is tied into a plot where you have to save the Earth. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and you never knew who Grandma was, like who they were talking about at the time too. You're like, wait, what?
Now, moving on to the controls in the game, going back to Battle Nexus again, the controls in that game were really simple. X was to jump, B was your strong attack, and A was your weak attack. And it was really great for the game because they weren't complicated at all. Now, in Mutant Nightmare, they switched the control scheme to A is your jump button, B is your weak attack, and Y is your strong attack. It just feels really awkward and weird after just getting off to play Battle Nexus.
Right, like you'll find yourself attacking when you should be jumping, and you'll find yourself jumping when you should be attacking.
It just feels really, really weird for the game.
Yeah, and they didn't change them going into Battle Nexus either. The first one had the same control scheme. Speaking of the first game, I also wanted to mention that the game was only 2 players. It got up to 4 in Battle Nexus and Mutant Nightmare. One new feature with the game, though, was the upgrades. Now, you're probably thinking, this is going to be pretty good. Well, it does help your character, but not really, because they replace the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like their weapons in that, which it doesn't feel right seeing, them use a different weapon than their default one.
And speaking of the weapons just look bizarre. Like, they're all white. They look like seashells, to tell you the truth. And they just look really, really weird. And one of them even has a head.
Yeah, and another thing, too, is that when you upgrade your character, they start getting lines through, their body and that have their color and that. I mean, what's the point of that?
I mean, they were probably just trying to bring it to a new age. Seeing how the Turtles kind of haven't changed since, the 80s when it first began. But it just feels really, really, really stupid. And I mean, Battle Nexus was just fine with it. I mean, they just kept the characters the same and everything. And now in this game, they just have to change everything and make it terrible.
Yeah, I know, and we could have upgraded characters without all the crap of changing, like putting lines through them and changing their weapons and that. And also, one thing is the box art of Mutant Nightmare. I mean, the first and second TMNT games of the series had a cartoonish style. This one makes them look realistic, which is cool and all, but this was the last game in the series, and it should be like, we did the first game and second game like this, you do the third and final game like that. Don't change it.
Now, the other thing that they show on the back of the box is you can unlock Turtles in Time. Now, that's the same thing they did in Battle Nexus with the arcade game, but if you remember, Turtles in Time is most well remembered for being on the Super Nintendo, and that was only 2-player. It was an arcade game, and I'll give it that, but still, you transitioned it from a 2-player game to a 4-player game, and it's just kind of weird.
Right. And another thing, too, is the crystals from Battle Nexus, I'm not sure if they're in the original or not, are still present in this one and play the same role, along with the other the items in that, like the food and that.
Now, and if you remember correctly, in Battle Nexus, there was a mode called Battle Nexus mode. It's not in Mutant Nightmare, which is kind of obvious, but they replaced it with an Ultimate Turtle mode, if that's what it was called, I don't remember. But basically, you get invincibility for a short period of time, which allows you to blast through a multitude of enemies. It's kind of, I don't really remember much about it, but it was kind of forgettable, and it really wasn't that fun. And the other thing is the group attacks. All 4 turtles can link up, kind of like in Transformers where they would form that big robot, and go through a multitude of enemies and perform special moves. And it's kind of hard to do because like everybody's focusing on beating up their own enemies, and they don't think that if you get up close with each other that you could do a special attack. Alright, I think we covered enough about both of these games, and now let's sit down and give them both a score.
I would give Battle Nexus an 8 out of 10. Great game. I would give Mutant Nightmare a 6 out of 10. It's a fun game, but doesn't compare to Battle Nexus.
And there you go. This has been the Second Chance Gamer.
And the Decoder.
Hope you enjoyed this combo review, and remember to subscribe. Thanks.